All right, so coming back, what do you learn from what's the takeaway there with the new Super Bowl champions? And for me, and this is kind of why I got back into football, what I do now, and what I think is just so important to the game. Your ability to win your 1v1 matchups determines your value in this league. By and large, when it comes down to it, can I beat the person in front of me? And what the Eagles have done is they've just gotten a lot of dudes who can beat the guy in front of them. And because of that, Vic can play that cover two defense. It was very simple: take away the first window throw and let the guys up front beat the people that they're going against. And that's obviously we show in the last picture of Jalen Carter. Part of that is phenomenal athleticism, phenomenal instinct to how to play this game, phenomenal confidence, and all of that stuff. But when you get enough of those guys and you get the skis pointed downhill in the same direction, you can really do some special things. So, number one takeaway, looking at it from that defense, Green Bay Packers have to find a pass rush, and a change to the defensive line coach that should or could help. But really, when you've got Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, and Khalil Mack, when you got those guys that are potential targets, they're going to be in the market. And they're, really for me, particularly the first two, Miles and Max, because they're guys that could have careers at Green Bay. It's not just a 1 or 2 year platoon deal with Khalil Mack. It's Max Crosby, young player, Myles Garrett, 27, 28 years old, still have a lot of football left in him. And you just think about, you brought in, obviously you talked about Reggie White, bringing Reggie and what he had, but you bring in Julius Peppers and those guys that are at that point in their career where they've done something great already. They're established, but they can still give you a lot of good years. And all three of those guys that want to win now, Goody's got to at least look at buying help this offseason from that room. Because just from a talent standpoint, as you look at it now, you got rid of Preston Smith, now that he was a great pass rusher, but I think he added something to that room. You don't really have a guy. You've paid Rashawn Gary to be that guy, and again, Pro Bowl player this year, but we don't look at him as a dominant pass rush force or a guy that you have to game plan around. Now, if you had a guy that you did have to game plan around, what does he start looking like? Even we saw it with the Vikings and the Texans swapping players last year with Danielle Hunter and Jonathan Grenard. They just swapped players. New environment. Both guys are like playing at all-pro caliber. They were good before, both of them, but Grenard in particular really kind of leveled up even more. And then you put Danielle Hunter down with Will Anderson. You see what happens to the game of both of those guys. They became arguably, the best duo in the National Football League. So sometimes you got to buy help. So it's not always draft and develop. And let's see if this is one of those deals. I think the other thing, or really the same thing, can be said about the offensive line, because look, I'm not big on non-contextual stats or metrics, but I think there are some things that are important to understand. And Josh Jacobs is doing a hell of a lot of this work on his own, making the first guy miss, breaking the first tackle. Now, depending on what stat you want to look at, he's either getting 1 yard to 2 yards of free grass before he makes contact. That is pales in comparison to the guys that are leading the National Football League, Saquon Barkley being at the top, I think, with over 3 or close to 4. So do you want to have a solid offensive line, or do you want to have a dominant offensive line? And we talked about this before. Have you drafted dominant personalities in that room? Have you drafted great guys? Have you drafted killers? Or street fighters, or guys that just want to get into the thick? How many TJ Langs are there in that room? Because those are the kind of guys who don't have to be the best athletes to be one of the key factors in what team is asserting dominance on that given day. We are going to go through, from a free agent perspective, and draftable offensive linemen on this show. We're going to start reviewing them starting next week or the week after. I haven't decided yet. If you have specific guys that you're looking for me to target, drop me a note. And with that said, guys, it's been a fun season. It's really good to see, for me, the investment of the trenches by the Philadelphia Eagles, how that made a difference ultimately, and I think determining the course of this football game, of course, the entire season. But they're being celebrated as these are really really special two special groups of guys, and really the engines for that football team. Something that Packers can certainly replicate if you look at the quarterback position, if you look at some of the talent you have across the board at the linebacker safety position with both football teams. There's a lot of similarities. I think the differences really come down to maybe a number one wide receiver. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers are, they've got two really number ones. They've got a great tight end, Tucker Kraft. I would take either one of those guys. They're fantastic. Obviously, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, both are fantastic guys. So the difference in these teams really comes down to how good the offensive and defensive lines are at Philly versus Green Bay, in my opinion. There's some other things going on, but really, if you want to just wholesale, what do we need to improve on to catch up? It'd be those two things. So that part's been fun. I want to thank our sponsor, Bet Online. Obviously, thanks to the Believe Network for having me on this platform. And thanks to everybody who's been watching. Keep dropping lines. I'll get back on this really soon. But until then, enjoy your off season. We'll get back to it.